You are sitting in the quiet now. The heavy, suffocating kind of quiet that settles into your ribs after you finally stop reaching. You put the phone down. You stop drafting the messages you'll never send. You stop dissecting their last words, searching for hidden meaning in the spaces they left empty. You stop trying to translate their distance into a language your heart can understand. And for the first time in months, maybe years, you just breathe. But beneath that breath is a tremor, a quiet panic, because you don't know what happens when you stop chasing someone who only ever knew how to run. You've been conditioned to believe that love requires motion, that if you stand still, you will lose them forever. So you ran after them. You softened your edges, you swallowed your needs. You became a living echo chamber for their discomfort, absorbing every flinch, every retreat, every quiet withdrawal, and telling yourself it was just how they loved. But the truth is not gentle. It does not wrap itself in comfort. It cuts straight through the narrative you've been clinging to. You were not failing to win them over. You were succeeding at proving their deepest fear. That love demands too much. That closeness means drowning. That they will be expected to give what they do not yet possess. And every time you chased, you handed them another reason to pull away. You became the very pressure they were trying to survive. Let's name the exhaustion. You are tired because you have been carrying two nervous systems at once. Yours, aching for reciprocity. Theirs, braced for invasion. Every message you sent triggered their threat response. Every attempt to connect registered as demand. Every gentle question felt like a subpoena. Their body did exactly what an overwhelmed nervous system is designed to do. It contracted. It numbed. It retreated into the only safe place it knows. Distance. But distance is not peace. It is a suspended state, a biological holding pattern. Their amygdala, the ancient alarm center of the brain, has been wired to interpret emotional intimacy as danger. Not because you are dangerous, but because their history taught them that closeness precedes loss, that vulnerability invites abandonment, that if they let someone in, they will eventually be expected to stay, and staying means losing control. So when you lean in, cortisol floods their bloodstream. Heart rate spikes. Breath shallows. The nervous system shifts into survival mode. And in survival mode, there is no room for tenderness. There is only retreat. You mistook their withdrawal for indifference. You called it coldness. You convinced yourself they simply didn't care enough. But biology doesn't lie. The human brain is wired for attachment, even when it pretends otherwise. They didn't stop caring. They became emotionally flooded. The walls weren't built to keep you out. They were built to keep themselves from imploding. And you kept knocking, hoping your warmth would melt the ice, unaware that the ice was the only thing keeping them from drowning. This is where the pattern breaks. Not with a grand declaration, not with a final argument, but with stillness. You stop chasing. Not as punishment, not as manipulation, as preservation. You drop the rope. You let the silence stretch. You stop explaining yourself to someone who only hears pressure. You stop monitoring their distance. You stop translating their absence into a reflection of your worth. You step into non-reactivity, not as a game, as a nervous system reset. When you stop pursuing, you stop feeding the cycle with your anxiety. You stop offering emotional labor to a system that treats it as a threat. You become still. You become untouchable. Not because you are cold, but because you are finally clear. You realize that your presence was never the problem. Your pursuit was. And when you remove the pursuit, you remove the resistance. The dynamic shifts. The gravity flips. And the person who spent months learning how to push you away suddenly finds themselves standing in an empty room, wondering where the echo went. Imagine the exact moment it begins to unravel inside them. Not when you announce your departure, not when you post something curated to make them notice, but when the silence becomes permanent. When 3 days pass without your familiar warmth, when 7 days stretch into 14, the notifications stop. The emotional scaffolding you quietly built around them vanishes without warning. At first, they feel relief. The pressure lifts. The cortisol drops. Their nervous system exhales. They tell themselves this is what they wanted. Freedom, space, no more expectations, no more emotional gravity pulling them toward a vulnerability they aren't ready to face. But the human brain does not tolerate sudden absence well. Dopamine, the chemical of anticipation, of craving, of reward prediction, begins to withdraw. Their system, so deeply conditioned to your consistent emotional availability as a baseline, starts searching for the pattern. They check their phone, not out of sudden devotion, out of biological conditioning. They scroll past your name. They notice the stillness. They replay the last conversation, realizing how much they leaned into your empathy while offering nothing in return. They start noticing the details they ignored, the way you remembered how they took their coffee, the way you softened your voice when their eyes grew distant, the way you never made them feel guilty for their need to disappear. And slowly, the realization cracks through. You were never the problem. You were the anchor. And they cut the rope. Now they are drifting. The detachment they wore like armor suddenly feels like isolation. The independence they praised feels like abandonment. They begin missing the quiet strength of your presence, not your chasing, your being. The version of you that didn't need them to fix themselves to feel worthy. And that absence becomes a weight they cannot rationalize away. They begin to orbit the memory of you. They draft messages and delete them. They watch your stories from accounts you'll never see. They ask mutual friends vague questions, disguised as casual curiosity. They start noticing how hollow their routines feel without your emotional gravity pulling them back to center. The tables don't just turn, they shatter. And in the wreckage, they finally feel what you felt for years. The ache of loving someone who is no longer within reach. But here is the trap, and you must see it before it sees you. When they finally reach out, it will not feel like victory. It will feel like relief. And that relief is dangerous. They will not return as a healed partner. They will return as a nervous system recalibrating to loss. They will test the waters. They will offer breadcrumbs disguised as breakthroughs. They will say the right things with the wrong rhythm, because their amygdala is no longer firing in panic, but their attachment system has not yet learned how to stay. Do not confuse their return with readiness. Do not mistake their curiosity for commitment. If you drop your boundaries the moment they show interest, you reset the cycle. You teach them that distance works, that silence earns attention, that withdrawal guarantees return. And you will spend another year carrying two nervous systems, wondering why your worth keeps shrinking to fit someone else's fear. The test is not whether they come back. The test is whether you can hold the line when they do. The test is whether you can look at their hesitation and still choose yourself. The test is whether you can let them miss you without rescuing them from the absence you finally allowed to breathe. You are not here to be the emotional emergency contact for someone who only knows how to run. You are here to honor the nervous system that finally chose peace. Let's go deeper into what actually happens inside them when the chase stops. The avoidant nervous system runs on prediction. It thrives on control. It maps out emotional territory like a battlefield, always scanning for exits, always measuring distance, always calculating how much intimacy is safe before the trap closes. Your pursuit was the metric they used to regulate their anxiety. As long as you were chasing, they knew exactly where the boundary was. They could lean back, secure in the knowledge that you would always close the gap. Your consistency became their safety net. Your empathy became their permission to stay detached. Because why risk vulnerability when you've already proven you'll carry the weight? But the moment you stop, the metric disappears. The prediction model fails. The nervous system enters uncertainty, and uncertainty, to an avoidant, is indistinguishable from threat. Their cortisol begins to rise again, but this time it's not from pressure. It's from loss. From the sudden realization that the person who absorbed their avoidance without judgment has finally stopped absorbing it. The dopamine withdrawal hits harder than they expected. Dopamine doesn't just drive desire, it drives pattern recognition. It drives the brain's need to complete unfinished loops. And you were an unfinished loop. A quiet obsession they never had to face because you kept knocking. Now the door is closed, and they are left standing in the hallway, realizing they never actually built a home inside you. They only used your space to hide from themselves. The breakdown doesn't look like tears. It rarely does. It looks like restlessness. It looks like overthinking. It looks like suddenly noticing how quiet their apartment is, how heavy their silence feels, how hollow their routines have become. It looks like checking their phone for the third time in an hour, not because they expect a message, but because their nervous system is screaming for the pattern to return. It looks like replaying conversations, analyzing your tone, wondering when they crossed the line from safe to suffocating. It looks like the slow, quiet unraveling of someone who finally realizes that the person they pushed away was the only one who never asked them to be anything other than human. This is not revenge. This is physics. Emotional gravity does not vanish when you stop chasing it. It redistributes. And the weight you carried for so long finally lands where it belongs. On them. Not as punishment, as consequence. You are not teaching them a lesson. You are allowing reality to speak. You are letting the natural law of attachment do what it was always meant to do. Pull toward what is secure, retreat from what is threatening, and ache for what is absent. You spent so long trying to be the safe harbor for someone who only knew how to sail away. But you were never meant to be the rescue mission for their avoidance. You were meant to be the revelation of your own worth. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you start living.